into two groups and alternated working between AMP and on-field training. In August, Coach McMullen started running practices 3 times a week as we learned that the season was postponed and there would be no preseason games or scrimmages. By Columbus Day weekend, we were ready to begin our shortened 9-game season. Playing with a mask was the first of many challenges we as a team were faced with, but every day we supported each other and felt fortunate for each second together on and off the field. Another huge challenge was replacing 10 seniors from our 2019 state championship team. But one by one, decisions were made and our team and its players kept getting better and better. One common goal this team had all year was being together every day and working towards a repeat state championship, which had not been done since 1992. The team finished the regular season undefeated and received the #1 seed going into the playoffs. East Greenwich hosted the semifinal game versus Barrington, where they scored 4 goals in the third quarter and advanced to the state championship game at Cranston Stadium. The state championship game was a tough one. LaSalle was a strong team, and both teams ended regulation scoreless and forced into overtime. For anyone who doesn't know overtime, it's reduced to a 7-on-7, which is a normal 11-on-11 during the regular play. With 1:28 into overtime, Bella Adelaide stole the ball from a LaSalle player and passed it to Alex Mega, who carried the ball, weaving in and out of defenders 75 yards to score in sudden death overtime for the game winner. Even though there are many highlights throughout the season, the #1 takeaway is that we truly are a team, where everyone had a role and everyone supported one another, one of the greatest seasons in East Greenwich field hockey history. So now I'm going to read you the players. Head coach for girls field hockey is Deb McMullen. Her assistant coaches are Allison Shunny, Angelica Mirandu, and Rachel Mirandu. We have senior Emma Berthew. She's a goalkeeper. Junior Hope Gee. She's a goalkeeper. Junior Lila Savanjevic. She's a junior. Sophia Bianco is a captain and she's a senior. Senior Bella Chambers, she's also a captain. We have a sophomore, Gianna Salvatore. We have a senior captain, Logan Shunny. We have a junior, Lola Balcom. We have a sophomore, Lene Shavenka. We have a junior, Madison Kavanaugh. We have a junior, Evelyn Clement. We have a sophomore, Alex Maga. We have a senior, Genevieve Cava. We have a sophomore, Jillian Pryor. We have a freshman, Catherine Neville. We have a freshman, Margaret Neville. We have a senior, Isabella Adelaide. We have a senior, Emily Osillo. We have a sophomore, Grace Casey, and Coach McMullen would like to recognize Grace Burbridge, her manager. That is your state championship field hockey team.
Thank you, Ms. Rhodes. And what I would say, we would typically be awarding certificates and the school committee would be standing for a picture with our athletes. That's not happening this evening, but certificates will be issued to the students in recognition of that state champion. So thank you very much, Ms. Rhodes. And take it, keep going.
Keep going, okay. All right, next up, so I went in order of how we won our championship. So that's the only reason why I went in this particular order for anyone who's wondering why I went this way. So next up is our boys soccer team. The 2020 version of East Greenwich boys soccer started out with a coach and 4 senior captains who developed a plan. Ethan, Aiden, Carter, and Kevin had a feeling all summer that if we were somehow allowed to play, we would compete for a Division II state championship. At the time, it seemed like a long shot that the team would have a season, let alone a perfect 13-0. From the first time the team was together for the 2-mile run, the captains emphasized social distancing and safety practices as often as possible. They knew that if they could continue to train and play, they had the squad who could be successful. There were times when the team wasn't sure if it would continue, but as time passed, they began to pick up steam. There were a number of seniors who contributed to the season. Brian and Will J provided timely assists against Pilgrim and Tollgate. Ryan's goal got a big day started against Rocky Hill, and he scored against Tollgate. In the same game, Aiden was successful in putting a goal in the net as well. Ben stole the ball and scored a big goal against Westerly to put us ahead. Olin helped control the midfield all season. Matt, Kevin, and Max were solid on defense all year as they gave up only 6 goals, and Max scored the game winner off a corner from Steven to get us on the board in the semifinals. Carter and Griff combined to give up 6 goals in 13 games, and Carter had 4 consecutive shutouts to finish out the year. Ethan and Aiden were the glue to keep us together in the midfield, and who could forget Andrew Mega's goal off Ethan's cross that was featured on ESPN, which solidified the boys soccer state championship. So here are your boys. Head coach is Pat McGurl, and his assistant coach was Alex Bortz. You have senior Carter Andrews, and he is a captain. Griff Gee, and he is a junior goalkeeper. You have senior Matt Chambers. You have senior Benjamin Allaire. You have senior Brian Anderson. You have junior Stephen Timperley. You have sophomore Quinn Madden. You have senior captain Kevin Sanciolo. You have senior captain Ethan Fain. You have senior Andrew Mega. You have senior Olin Thompson. You have senior William Hera Jackson. You have junior Carson Paul, junior Colin Fain, sophomore Diego Gomez, senior Ryan Silverman, senior Aiden Marinelli, junior Jacob Picozzi, senior captain Aiden Kosak, senior Max Matazian, and then sophomore Luke Pedro. And that's your boys state championship soccer team. All right, next up I have my girls soccer team, and here's their bio. As we began social distancing practices over the summer. Many believed that we would be lucky if we were able to get a single game in. We feel incredibly fortunate that we were able to not only get a single game in, but that we would go on to win the program's first ever state championship. Although it was a season like no other in terms of regulations, rule changes, schedule changes, and more, it was also a season of really special memories. Each and every player committed to building a strong and safe team culture throughout the season. We got better each and every week, and we grew closer as a team. Creating a hybrid-like season between Division I opponents and our Division II league games, the team went into the playoffs feeling prepared and excited, coming from behind in multiple last-minute victories, including a double overtime 3-2 victory in the championship game. While soccer is the very definition of a team sport, and while championships are only won when everyone contributes in their own way, I would be remiss if I didn't highlight some of our leaders this season, beginning with the standout senior class. Captains Maya Barnes, Rosa Cleary, and Maeve Finney led our team on the field and by example. All academic selections Maya Barnes teamed up with the fellow senior leader Tori Duke this year to lock down our back line, while Rosa Cleary solidified her senior season as one of the best goalkeepers in the state. Maeve Finney is often considered the rock of our midfield as she pairs well with technical superstar Izzy Gelheiser. Maeve is tough as nails and came through in the clutch with the game-tying goal in the championship game. Abby Walsh was, in many ways, the heart and soul of the team this year, not only earning the Alice Sullivan Perseverance Award, but also having the innate ability to make her teammates and her coaches laugh every day. Sophomore Abby Lewis led our offense as our leading goal scorer, finishing the season with 8 goals. Other strong contributors throughout the season included Sophia Barnes, Ava Simpson, and Gracie Kaufman. 2020 was certainly a rough year for all of us, but this season gave us the chance to come together and change the fabric of the East Greenwich soccer program for the better. While we will miss the talents, accomplishments, and spirits of the senior class, I am excited for the development of the program in the years to come. As an alumna of this town, I could not be prouder of the team of strong, smart, hardworking, and purpose-driven young women. Lastly, credit must be given to our wonderful assistant coach, Zach Ward. He not only led our JV team to perhaps the most fun season ever, but he supports our program with nothing but his generosity and his love of soccer and team. Congratulations to all, and thank you to the school committee for your support this season. Your girls soccer team. Head coach, Karen Lockhart, and assistant coach, Zach Ward. Freshman goalkeeper, Samantha Lombardi. Freshman, Tegan Bristol. Senior captain, Maeve Finney. junior Chloe Houston, sophomore Abby Lewis, sophomore Ava Simpson, sophomore Riley Gopa Christian, junior Sienna Potorsky, senior Tori Duke, sophomore Isabel Gilheiser, sophomore Sydney Mendez, senior captain Maya Barnes, sophomore Gracie Kaufman, junior Sophia Barnes, sophomore Grace Burkett, sophomore Lana Diorio, senior Catherine Winter, freshman Julia Moore, senior Abby Walsh, freshman Paige Flynn, sophomore Davin Finney, and senior captain Rosa Cleary. So that's your state championship girls soccer team. This is your individual cross-country girls champion, Reese Fees. A media release on August 5th, 2020 announced that the East Greenwich girls cross-country team would soon be gaining a new team member from New Jersey in Reese Fees. After the announcement, Reese quickly heard from many future friends and teammates who were excited to welcome her to Rhode Island. The addition of Reese elevated an already strong East Greenwich team. Our girls cross-country head coach, Erin Terry, shared that, in quotes, Reese has been amazing to work with this year. She and I first spoke in the summer when she announced that she would be moving to East Greenwich and attending East Greenwich High School. We spoke about training and her goals. She was so easy to talk to, and the thing that impressed me the most was that she had already outlined short and long-term goals for herself, as well as her new team that she had yet to even meet. She has an excellent to communicate with, which are a pleasure to coach. She fit in right away with her East Greenwich teammates and made a smooth transition to her new school as well. Reese is a kind, sweet, gracious, and respectful young woman, and I look forward to working with her for 2 more years in East Greenwich, as well as helping her to achieve her future goals, end quote. Reese was able to live up to all the hype with a dominating debut season in Rhode Island. She was undefeated all season, winning the Class B title, as well as breaking our East Greenwich cross-country course record twice this season. Most notably, she won the 2020 individual state cross-country title, a feat that has not been accomplished by an East Greenwich female since 2002. So that is Reese. And our final state championship this year is esports, and that is our short write-up is congratulations to our Avenger Esports League of Legends team on a perfect undefeated season, winning the state championship in their inaugural year. They never lost an individual game within a match the entire season. Truly incredible feat. Special congratulations to our seniors Eric Fang and Sammy Ganji on starting up the team this year, and to first-year head coach Zach Hollowell. Congratulations to the entire team. The PlayV's platform will be doing an official stream of the championship on December 22nd. So with that being said, that is our 5 state championship teams.
That is awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Rhodes. Appreciate that. And I appreciate so many of the athletes that have joined us this evening for their recognition as state champions.
Ms. Rhodes, I echo Mrs. Meyer's thanks to you. Congratulations on your inaugural season as our athletic director, the coaches, the assistant coaches, and the athletes. I wish we could be celebrating in person. As Mrs. Meyer frequently says, we as a district have much to celebrate. So I want to thank all of you for emphasizing and affirming, that point that Mrs. Meyer so often makes. So thank you all very, very much.
No, thank you. And I just want to say, this was a very difficult season. I came in halfway, so I sort of, I just want to give a shout out to Bob Downey and Chris Cobain for really helping me sort of step into that role and help these guys out. But the coaches were very, very impressive this season, making sure that these athletes stayed safe. And kudos to the student athletes. They worked hard to make sure that they did what they had to do to get to this point. So congratulations to everybody for doing what they had to do. And, we move forward as we move forward. So.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
With that, I think we move to the next agenda item, which is we did have an executive session on December 15th. I will entertain a motion to seal the minutes from that executive session. So moved by Ms. Powell, seconded by Mr. Murphy. Any discussion? All in favor of sealing executive session minutes from 12:15 signify by saying aye. Roll call vote.
Allison Powell,
Aye.
Ann Musella,
Aye.
Jean Quinn,
Aye.
Lori McEwen,
Aye.
Kevin Murphy,
Aye.
William Hangan,
Aye.
Tim Muniz.
Aye.
Thank you all. Minutes are sealed. I can report out that by a 7-0 vote, the school committee voted to continue its deliberations of the level 4 paraprofessional grievance in executive session on January 5th. Thank you. Next, we move to public comments. This portion of public comment is for members of the public who want to comment on items that are not on the agenda. And at this time, I'd also like to take the opportunity, given that there are some members of the public who are participating by phone, first to introduce our panel, which I probably should have done at the start of the meeting. We have, in addition to me, we have our vice chair, Dr. Laura McEwen, and school committee members in the order in which they appear on my screen. Dr. Jean Quinn, Tim Munoz, Will Hangan, Kevin Murphy, Allison Powell. We also have our superintendent of schools, as you've heard, Alexis Meyer. We have our clerk, Chris Meglio. We also have district counsel, Matt Oliverio, as well as our director of technology and our Zoom for the evening, Dr. Steve Arnoff. I should also mention that for those of you in the public who are phoning in and want to participate, you will press *9 to raise your hand and then *6 to mute and unmute yourself. So with that said, are there any members of the public who wish to come forward with public comment on anything that is not on the agenda? Seeing no hands, I think we move on to the next agenda item. We have minutes from 2 different meetings to approve. The first is a regular meeting of the school committee held on October 20th. That was with the outgoing school committee. So we have 4 of us who participated in the meeting then, and then the 3 new members who will abstain from this vote because they're not present. But I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes of the October 20th meeting.
So moved.
So moved by Dr. McEwen, second by Ms. Powell. Any discussion? Roll call vote. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Allison Powell,
Aye.
Ann Musella,
Aye.
Jean Quinn,
Aye.
Lori McEwen.
Aye.
And the 3, that's right. So 4 in favor, 3 abstentions. Thank you, Ms. DiMaglio. Next, we have regular meeting minutes from December 1st. I'll entertain a motion to accept those minutes.
So moved.
So moved by Dr. McEwen, seconded by Ms. Powell. Any discussion on those minutes? Dr. McEwen.
It just in the order, thank you, Madam Chair. The order, sorry, I had it in front of me a second ago. Oh, I had it on my computer. I believe that when we reformed school committee officers, that we nominate, the call was first for nominations for the chair and then for the vice chair. So I believe I nominated you. You were voted as chair, and then afterwards we did the vote on vice chair. Just an order thing. I don't know that we even have to change it, but I just wanted to note that.
That's my recollection as well. The minutes could certainly be changed to reflect that, if everyone agrees to accept that change. Any other discussion on the December 1st minutes? Seeing none, let's roll call vote. All those in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye.
Allison Powell,
Aye.
Ann Musella,
Aye.
Jean Quinn,
Aye.
Lori McEwen,
Aye.
Kevin Murphy,
Aye.
William Hangan,
Aye.
Kim Muniz.
Aye.
Thank you all. Minutes approved. Next, we have a series of action items. We'll take these a couple at a time. Let's take we have 2 parental leave requests, one request and an extension request. Parental leave request from Kelly Winchell, an English teacher at Cole, and parental leave extension request by Melissa Constant, math teacher at Cole. I'll entertain a motion to approve the leave and that extension. So moved by Ms. Powell. Is there a second? Seconded by Dr. Quinn. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving those 2 leaves signify by saying aye. Roll call vote.
Allison Powell,
Aye.
Ann Musella,
Aye.
Jean Quinn,
Aye.
Lori McEwen,
Aye.
Kevin Murphy,
Aye.
William Hangan,
Aye.
Kim Muniz.
Aye.
Those leaves are approved. Next, we have an extension of unpaid leave of absence requested by Lindsay Kelly, a speech language pathologist at Meadowbrook. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
By Dr. McEwen, second by Ms. Powell. Any discussion? Roll call vote. All those in favor?
Allison Powell,
Aye.
Ann Musella,
Aye.
Jean Quinn,
Aye.
Lori McEwen,
Aye.
Kevin Murphy.
Aye.
William Hangan. William Hangan.
Aye.
Kim Muniz.
Aye.
Thank you. Unpaid leave is approved. Next is a resignation. Benjamin, paraprofessional at Hannaford. I'll entertain a motion to approve her resignation
So moved.
by Dr. McEwen, seconded by Ms. Powell. Discussion? All those in favor, roll call vote.
Ms.
Allison.
Musella, might
Yes,
I
sorry?
just, extend our appreciation to Ms. Benjamin for her more than 20 years of service to the district. I had the good fortune of speaking with her so she could personally offer her letter of resignation, and she has served students in our district well and our school district well, and I wish her all the best.
Thank you, Mrs. Meyer. We echo your sentiments. Thank you. Any other discussion? All those in favor of approving the resignation signify by saying aye. Roll call.
Allison Powell,
Aye.
Ann Musella,
Aye.
Jean Quinn,
Aye.
Lori McEwen,
Aye.
Kevin Murphy,
Aye.
William Hangan,
Aye.
Kim Muniz.
Aye.
And again, thank you very much to Ms. Benjamin for your years of service. And again, we're sorry we can't do this in person. It's a shame, but thank you. The next action item, we have approval of administrative contract of the assistant principal at Cole. Is there a motion to approve? Dr. Quinn, so moved and seconded by Mr. Murphy. I'll call for discussion. I actually just have one comment. When I looked over it, I think it is section 9. This is for Mr. Oliverio. I think there's one portion that is, just want to make sure that it is all in third person. I think there's some language in there that is first person in that one section. So it should read administrator shall in section 9. And so I would suggest that, non-material change. Is there any other discussion?
Madam Chair, 9A, 9, where,
It's 9A, I believe.
okay. Okay,
So there's some first person language and it
I
should
see, yeah,
read
second person, yeah, okay,
administrator shall, right?
thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any further discussion. So all those in favor of approving the contract with that change signify by saying aye. Roll call vote.
Allison Powell,
Aye.
Ann Musella,
Aye.
Jean Quinn,
Aye.
Lori McEwen,
Aye.
Kevin Murphy,
Aye.
William Hangan,
Aye.
Tim Muniz.
Aye.
Thank you. Contract is approved. Next item for business for action is to award a contract for 2 maintenance F-350 trucks to Flood Ford. Mrs. Meyer, do you want to present that item, or Ms. Powell, do you want to discuss?
I can
Either.
certainly present it, and then Ms. Powell, if you want to follow that up with anything that I might have left out, that would be great. So
Thank you.
these 2 trucks were part of the bond that was approved on November 19th. In the bond, there was anticipated, I believe, 5 total trucks or 6 total trucks. The school committee has already approved 2. This is an additional 2 that is before you for your approval.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to award the contract.
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Munoz, seconded by Ms. Powell. Is there any discussion? Anything further to add to Mrs. Meyer's description? Seeing none, we'll go to a roll call vote. All those in favor?
Allison Powell.
Aye.
Ann Musella.
Aye.
Jean Quinn.
Aye.
Lori McEwen.
Aye.
Kevin Murphy.
Aye.
William Hangan.
Aye.
Tim Muniz.
Aye.
Thank you. Contract is approved. Thank you all. Next action item, discussion of potential solution of the subcommittee. So the field subcommittee, we sent the charge later. It's on the district website. As far as I can tell, this is something I want us to talk about. As far as I can tell, the field subcommittee has not been active, certainly in the last 2 years, probably the 2 years before that. I'm not certain. It was formed in 2010. It is a school committee subcommittee, but it prescribes certain, really the scope within the charge has to do with potential maintenance and sort of division of authority and responsibility over our fields. And because it has not been active, I wanted to bring it before this body to potentially dissolve it, or alternatively, if there is a member who wants to take it on and chair that subcommittee, we can do that and get that moving. Another potential option is we've discussed the potential for generating revenue by renting out our fields, and so that could be covered not necessarily by a field subcommittee, but it could be covered in revenue discussions that don't necessarily have to come up in the context of a fields subcommittee. So I would just like us to discuss that. We can certainly act on that. I don't think that there's, to my knowledge, there's no MOU with the town. This is not a joint subcommittee, even though we have town representation on the subcommittee. And I would just ask, I see Ms. Powell, your hand is raised. Just before I get to that, I want to, because Mrs. Meyer would know more about the history of this than any of us. I would just ask her if she has any additional historical information or any additional color on the matter. Mrs. Meyer,
Yes,
anything to
absolutely.
add?
Happy to
Yeah.
add what color I can to the conversation. Yesterday, I believe it was yesterday, I was leaving Meadowbrook and coming around that back road that brings you out to the high school that we're using now as part of our dismissal process. And, I passed by those fields with the football field on the right and the other fields on the left. And that is an impressive complex. And that complex is there as a result of that fields committee work that really came together initially as a result of disappointment, I use that word, amongst our town about the conditions of our fields. especially with the amount of use it gets in our youth sports, as well as our own athletics that are associated with our high school and middle school sports. And that effort was impressive with what we have before us, and what our student athletes and children of our town are able to use. So that's the history of it. They completed that work, and then it's sort of paralleled with what became the building committee and all of the work around the fields at Cole and the fields at the high school. But now, we have a facilities committee, and I would think that should we need some work, whether it's, through revenue or as a subcommittee of the facilities committee on our fields, that it could be realized in that manner.
Thank you. Ms. Powell, I recognizing that it's intimately connected to buildings and facilities, I'll turn to you. I'm sorry, I know your hand was raised. Thank you.
No, that's great. I am actually really glad to have heard that from Mrs. Meyer. So read over the charge and consulted with our facilities director, to also get some background. And it was agreed that the objectives of the field committee are very important, but much like with a regulatory buildings committee, when there's not an active project going on, sometimes it's hard to keep meeting and having the momentum when you're not like in the process of building something. But what happens is then, what about the maintenance? What about when we need something new? What about discussing that? So I would propose to this body dissolving this as a specific subcommittee and proposing that the facilities committee will either schedule a new meeting to meet quarterly, or devote one meeting each quarter of the facilities committee to the fields, where we will invite the different members that are contemplated in the fields committee charge to join us to have those specific discussions. And then that way fields are drawn into our master planning work, into our maintenance work, and into our budgeting. And if it's determined that we need additional work on the fields, or we need to build new fields, that would basically become sort of a fields building committee, just like we do now. So facilities deals with the day-to-day, with the discussing, with the getting us to that place of we either need to fix or build. And if it's decided that we will, then, this sort of very broad and specific body will be formed, just like we do for construction project with a building committee, to handle that. So that fields are part of, all of the planning that we're contemplating, and that we work on that relationship with Parks and Rec and with the ground superintendent, because we do, just like with the trucks, we sort of piggyback with the town, and we are purchasing the trucks, but we buy plows, and then the town uses them to plow not just the schools, but the town. And so the fields are kind of like that. Everybody uses them. And so this way we'll sort of bring that into the conversation, but they won't sort of get forgotten when there's not a project going on. If that is amenable to this, the facilities committee would be willing to take on the 3 objectives there in this charge if this committee were to be dissolved.
Thank you, Ms. Powell. I mean, I also do recall about 2 years ago, there was some discussion and this was sort of on the heels of the facilities rental policy that we worked through and approved. Then there was the piece of renting our fields, which was a little bit more complex because the town does a certain amount of maintenance, and Parks and Rec would have to administer a certain amount. Where does the revenue go? Who administers sort of the rental pieces and liaises with potential people who would rent from us? So there's a revenue piece, and I recall at the time from conversations with the town that there was some MOU contemplated that I don't know if it was ever executed between the town and the school that really they're also spelled out, excluding renting, but it also contemplated and sort of spelled out who's responsible for maintaining what. I haven't seen this document ever, but it strikes me that this is something that
Yes.
could and should be revisited, particularly if we are going to pursue it as in the context of revenue.
And I too
Other
have
things.
heard of this
Right.
this document, and I think it was not done as collaboratively in the past as I think it could be done now. And those are some of the discussions that I had when we were talking about taking this on. And I think that would be one of the goals of these very specific meetings, is to not just discuss the 3 objectives of the charge, but to, if all parties are amenable, that would ultimately be what we were trying to do by devoting this time to this specific topic, is so that we would have some sort of agreement about how that would work, because they are used by everyone in the town. And so that would be delineated, because it would be helpful not just for, use, but also for maintenance and for budgeting for both the town and the school district. So I think that's a goal.
It would be good to have clarity around that. Mr. Murphy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would agree. It would streamline. I think it would streamline the process, and also would bring it under that rather broad umbrella, as Ms. Powell stated. So I'm in favor of that. I mean, there's so many things we need to cover, right? So if any opportunity to streamline is for me a welcome opportunity. So I think that's a great proposal, Ms. Powell. Thank you.
Thank you. In terms of how we effectuate this, in terms of steps, we could vote to dissolve the field subcommittee today. And then, if this is the way we want to go, and then what I would ask then is Ms. Powell to come to us on January 5th with a revised committee charge that would
Include the
contemplate all that and whatever other updates you might want to make. But that's the way I would see going forward. I suppose we could discuss it further, or I could ask for a motion with respect to the field subcommittee, and we can discuss further if that motion is seconded. Is there a motion to dissolve the field subcommittee? So moved by Ms. Powell. I see 3 hands. I'll give it to Mr. Hangen, seconded by Mr. Hangen. Is there discussion on dissolving the field subcommittee? Any further discussion? I think we covered it. All those in favor of dissolution signify by saying aye. Roll call vote.
Allison Powell,
Aye.
Ann Musella,
Aye.
Jean Quinn,
Aye.
Lori McEwen,
Aye.
Kevin Murphy,
Aye.
William Hangen,
Aye.
Tim Muniz.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, Ms. Powell, for your willingness to add this to your pile. And we'll look forward to seeing the charge. Thank you. Next, we have school committee meeting date calendar. We looked at this once, so this is a second read, potential adoption of dates. We probably should adopt it because our next meeting is in 2021. There are only a few changes before you. We did, first change is just we added to the February 23rd meeting we will start off with a joint meeting with the town council. That's part of our budget season, and we agreed that it would be our turn to host a joint meeting. So that's contemplated in the February 23rd date. If we were to have executive session on that date, we would probably have that after our regular meeting. We added another date in March to sort of spread out the budget workshops. And then we also changed one of the September dates, because originally we had a meeting scheduled for Rosh Hashanah. So we changed that date as well. So, and I should look at this revised. And so specifically, we had a meeting scheduled on the first draft calendar for September 7th. That's been changed to September 14th on the revised calendar. And again, I'll note that we normally meet only once in each of July and August. We have 2 dates here. I would just propose keeping those placeholders. We don't know what COVID will bring us, and we can always cancel one of them. Might as well have it penciled in. So with that, we can discuss, or if anybody has any additional comments, or I'll entertain a motion to accept the revised. Dr. McEwen.
Just a quick question, Ann, thank you.
Yep.
So, and I don't have the revision in front of me, I have the old one.
Sure.
I thought that I read that we were adding the 9th and the 11th in March. That then looks like March 2nd, March 9th, March 11th, and March 16th. So 4 meetings in March, is that correct?
That's the way the calendar reads. Yes.
Spreading out the admin, tech, personnel, some of those budget meetings?
That's right. That's right. Well, because the 16th is our actual budget hearing. So that means that we have workshops slated for February 23rd, March 2nd, 9th, and 11th. So we have budget workshops spread out amongst 4 dates. Now, certainly the most important thing right now is to actually schedule our meetings. We can move the budget workshops around if the budget owners need to, but the important thing is to just set those dates at this point. So I'll entertain a motion to accept this revised. Yes, Ms. Powell, please.
This is a very silly comment. I just wanted to, because we note when they're not on the 1st and 3rd Tuesday, I just wanted to note that neither of the meetings in August are on the 1st or 3rd Tuesday, and they're not noted as much. That was it. That's my whole comment.
So we have to add an asterisk.
Yeah,
or
they
something?
need little yellow thing because it's just inconsistent. That's
Yeah.
all. That's it.
Okay.
That was my
Yeah.
only.
Thank you so much. We can, when we publish it, we can make note of that. The other thing just to point out is that this revised calendar, March 16th, is indicated as a budget hearing, and we did not have a date. We did not assign the budget hearing to a particular date on the 1st. March 16th remains. So, so with that, is there a motion to accept this revised meeting schedule? So moved by Mr. Murphy. Is there a second? Seconded by Ms. Powell. Any further discussion?
The only other comment would be that we'll notice when we are no longer on Zoom that, but that we're likely going to be doing a number of these via Zoom for the foreseeable future. Because that allows us to have all of the public join in that way, where we couldn't have everybody in a physical space.
Yes. Good point. Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll put it to a vote. Roll call vote. All those in favor of accepting the calendar signify by saying aye.
Allison Powell,
Aye.
Ann Musella,
Aye.
Jean Quinn,
Aye.
Lori McEwen,
Aye.
Kevin Murphy,
Aye.
William Hangan,
Aye.
Tim Muniz.
Aye.
Thank you all. We have the date set. Thank you. Next item, action item is we have a strategic plan to come up with. We have our agenda item says a discussion of timeline, development, and approval of the ad hoc committee charge. You have in your packet, or was sent to you separate from your packet, we have a draft charge, which is really the only action item before us tonight. We are, and I'm going to turn this over to Dr. McEwen in a moment, and also Mrs. Meyer. Typically, this is a longer process, but we're currently under our strategic plan 2020, and it will soon be 2021. There's a proposed timeline to get this accomplished in a period of about 6 months, which is doable, but it will require some concerted, sort of efficient action. What is before us tonight in terms of taking action is to approve the charge for this ad hoc strategic plan committee, who will be, as you see on the other document, who will be in collaboration with various working groups led by our administrators and with input from certain of our subcommittees. be conducting much of this work to bring before us as a full body. But in order to start the work in January, we need to approve a charge and form the strategic plan steering committee. So that is why the charge is before you. In addition, then we, I'd also like to turn it over to Dr. McEwen and Mrs. Meyer to sort of discuss the process, the composition, and what you have before you, which is sort of a draft timeline. So we'll discuss it all at once, and then we'll turn back to the charge. Dr. McEwen?
Sure, thank you, Madam Chair. So yeah, as Anne shared, that we are looking tonight to just approve this ad hoc committee charge, but you would likely, as members, want to know what the steering committee would do and the process would be like. And so Ms. Musella, I think, has turned it over to me. I had spoken with her. She and I, Mrs. Meyer, had discussed my role in helping to shepherd the strategic planning, because this is something I've been involved with professionally as a district administrator, and now it's something I do in my consulting world. So it's something that I'd be honored to help us with the 2 years left on my term to work on this with you all. What we're envisioning is the steering committee, that is the charge that you have in front of you, would be formed to advise the superintendent. So the way the process works is we approve a strategic plan, and then the superintendent and her team fulfill that plan. In order to make this process as inclusive and collaborative as possible, we would form a steering committee. The steering committee, you see that minimum composition in front of you. So it's inclusive of district administration, including the superintendent, faculty members, teachers, etc., other staff members, community members, students, up to 3 members of the school committee. And because we can't go to 4, because then we'd have a quorum, there could be have an institute of higher education here in the town, for example, business community members, etc., so that we can be as inclusive as possible. That steering committee then sets up some work groups. I've shared with you a draft in here of the types of work that folks will be doing: reading relevant research, looking at the current state of our school district, envisioning what a possible future state could be aligned with our vision of a graduate that was completed after the last strategic plan. So this now provides us in many ways with a North Star that will obviously come up for discussion, and there could be slight changes made here, but this is really what we decided we wanted for our students, and we'll create a strategic plan that's aligned to that. The steering committee advises the superintendent. The superintendent then takes all of this work, with my help, with Ms. Musella's help, as an overarching sort of design team. She puts it together and then puts it in front of you for your approval. So the steering committee is advisory, but the work is so collaborative that so often, they come together in such a strong way that we build something that's really representative of the community. And then after that, the work begins with that informing the superintendent's goals, the goals of those who work for her, and us having regular updates on that. So that's kind of the process. Hopefully you've seen in here what some of those committee meetings could look like. What I left out perhaps was that we will seek additional input. So the steering committee is not the only group of folks who will be able to share, inform us, be consulted, give opinions. Community forums, surveys, and those kinds of things are included in the process. So I could go on, but I will stop. Hopefully that was clear. And Mrs. Meyer, if you'd like to add, and then we'll take some questions, right, Ms. Musella?
Yes, perfect. And we have to fill in a couple of things that we need to decide as a group in terms of tightening up the charge as well. Mrs. Meyer.
Yes, thank you, Dr. McEwen. It would be hard to improve upon anything that you shared just now. The only thing that I would add, as it not only informs the superintendent's goals, but it will Our strategic plan will contemplate the state strategic plan, along with then inform individual school improvement plans in the district. And that's the only thing that I would add. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Meyer. And I'm just going to sort of identify the specifics within the charge that we want to talk about, and then I will open this up for discussion before we entertain a motion on approving the charge. And that is specifically, if you have the charge before you, a couple of things. Our last strategic plan was a 5-year plan. Because of the timing of this, do we want this process to culminate in a 5-year strategic plan or a 4-year strategic plan or something different? We've drafted the documents to contemplate basically a 4-year strategic plan. The other piece is just in terms of composition. Wondering, we've left a blank. I left a blank in a maximum number of steering committee members to see if we should cap that at all. But then we also just added just the minimum, as Dr. McEwen pointed out, but that can be added to. So there may be, we endeavor to include all stakeholders at the various levels, but those are the open items, really. It's the length of the plan, maximum number of members, and if there's something else that should be strictly delineated within the composition. So there's that for discussion, as well as the whole process. And I just also want to extend my gratitude to, of course, Mrs. Meyer, who is tireless, and also for Dr. McEwen for offering her time and expertise. A lot of districts engage outside consultants in this work. We're fortunate to have Dr. McEwen, who, as she points out, it's not to imprint her own vision, but to really help facilitate a true district vision, but bringing her professional experience and knowledge to. I really appreciate it. So with that, I'll open it up. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm glad that you mentioned the length of time. We all know that the world changes so quickly,
Mr. Murphy.
Particularly now, and probably now more than ever. I mean, maybe, in the 30s, 40s, or 50s, there wasn't quite as much change, but things change quite rapidly. I was wondering, can we make it a 3-year? Is that too soon? Is it, will we be revisiting it too often? Is 5 years too long? Is 3 years too short? Is 4 just right? I don't know the answer to that. I welcome any comments to educate me. There are people with a lot more experience than I regarding this particular policy. So Dr. McEwen, for example, would you mind commenting on that?
No, if you don't mind, Ms. Musella.
Great question, please. Yeah.
So I have a couple of thoughts. One is that we could actually, a strategic plan, we could just say develop a strategic plan, and it could be a point that we bring at one of our first steering committee meetings. I'm actually in favor of a 5-year plan. I hear everything that you're saying, Mr. Murphy, but we set our goals within that first year. You will approve this by June, hopefully at our June meeting. At that point, July 1 begins our next school year. And so this budget process may or may not, will probably not contemplate the strategic planning. Now, that still means that no matter how much money we put into professional development, et cetera, Mrs. Meyer will still have some flexibility around that. But my point is that when we set the budget process, we may not be able to go in full swing first year. We're still trying to give people lots of time to learn what they need to, things that are new for them, et cetera, in that first year. And what we would do is this plan, do, study, act cycle that I think Mrs. Meyer is very familiar with. And most of my colleagues say that that's why they like a 5-year plan. We believe the state might be looking at a 3-year plan. And so one of the things I'd like to do in one of our early meetings with the steering committee, potentially, we'll be reviewing strategic plans, state level, district level, looking at some plans from around the country to get a sense of sort of the format that we like best, what we think makes sense. And in that, we could look at the 3 to 5. I wonder, Ms. Musell, if it's a point that we need to arrive at right now, or if we allow that we could even say a 3 to 5 year plan, or something. We're not going to do a 1 year plan. The way budget cycles work, et cetera, it just would not make sense for us. But we will, Mr. Murphy, set annual goals from that. So our superintendent will set her annual goals for the district based off of our 5 year plan, and we'll be strategic in that. So it should culminate in the achievement of the plan over 5 years as we chunk down the essential actions by year. So
Right.
long way of saying, while I like a 5 year plan, I wonder if we might leave that
Sure.
open.
So if we look at them as different gears, to the extent that we can enmesh them, then whether it be, the budget is enmeshed with, to the extent that we can do that, that is my priority and my interest, to the extent it's possible. But thank you for those comments.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Ms. Powell.
Hi, sort of going along with what Mr. Murphy said, when he was talking about the 3, and then listening to Dr. McEwen about 5, and both of those make sense. My point was, I know there are other facets of administering a school district where different kinds of plans and reports are due on certain schedules. And again, a lot of what I know right now most intimately is facilities. And so when you have to report to RIDE, you're required to do it every 5 years about your facilities, but you have to have your 3-year priorities and your 5-year priorities. I'm not 100% sure how many other things that were required either by statute or regulation to do those whether there's, student testing reports that have to go in on a certain number of years or things like that. So that just to look at how many different things we administer that have kind of rules behind them on how often we have to do them, and maybe see if there's some alignment there. And if not, when you're talking about every year goals, if it's a 5-year plan, it's yearly goals, but by year 3, like a milestone. But it was more just to I know we have to, a lot of the things that the strategic plan will touch or encompass probably have their own kind of reporting cycles, and that might be illustrative.
Thank you, Ms. Powell. Good points. All additional, and I do like the idea of perhaps leaving it open-ended, because and let the steering committee arrive at it a little bit more just through the process of its work, and to determine what makes the most sense, given any potential alignment, as Mr. Murphy and Ms. Powell have suggested. Are there additional comments? I thought I saw it. Mr. Munoz, thank you.
Yes, I just one comment and one quick question. I do think that's a smart idea, Madam Chair, to make the decision about the length of time, maybe when the steering committee is convened, because I think you can certainly make a case for 5 years and also 3, and we just probably haven't had enough time to air that out. So I think that's smart. And I, to Mr. Murphy's point and Ms. Powell's point, and I'm fairly confident Dr. McEwen's said this as well. I do think it's important to, if it is a 3 or 5 year plan, is to be able to have horizon 1, 2, 3 and milestones along the way and stuff like that. Because if I look at the 5-year plan from 2015 to 2020, which I think has a lot of excellent content, as well thought through, a lot of ambition and stuff like that. But I would say perhaps where it falls short is that it's not clear in what time horizon those things were to take place. And Dr. McEwen and I have had some good conversations just separately offline too. So I think linking this to, year-to-year progress and, large budget categories, and giving Mrs. Meyer the latitude to speed things up or slow things down, all in service of reaching the end goal. I think those are all, things that we'll know much further when we get into it. So I think that's all a good discussion. A really quick question, which is just when we say this is a comprised of a minimum, does that mean that we could add people to it? And I'm not looking to load it up, but the one thing I did say was one student representative felt a little light and from off the top of my head. But so just in terms of the charge and the composition of what we're agreeing to right now, how does that work?
Well, I would suggest, thank you for your comments. I'm going to answer that specific question with respect to the charge. If we figure out if we need a maximum number of members, or maybe there isn't a maximum, we can certainly add to it. The idea is some of this language is taken from the last charge, frankly, and we can build on it. And really, it's just a minimum. So it doesn't, we're certainly free to add more of any of these. We don't have on here a district level administrator. We can delineate that, and perhaps we should, but in fact, maybe I'll suggest it, at least at a minimum one district level administrator. It's in addition, of course, to the superintendent. And again, that's just a minimum. So the question really is if we want to cap the number of members of a steering committee. We don't know how much community interest there's going to be. So really, I would propose an answer. So what I'm hearing is proposing the following changes. First of all, this will culminate in a 3 to 5 year strategic plan, number one. Second, whether or not we want a maximum number. Third, adding a district level administrator. But then that means we need to see if we want a maximum number.
Ms. Musella?
Yes.
It's so, first of all, none of these cap, and so I wouldn't cap people from each. I think that at least one of all of those makes sense. The reason I wouldn't say just one district administrator is the steering committee will advise, they will take part in work groups, but if we get to specific goals that need specific strategies, measurable outcomes, and essential actions, that's the language I've used. We may choose different language for ours, but that kind of thing. We will want the person who is most responsible for getting that done in the district to take part in that. So if there are, looking at the next development of this becomes a scorecard for the administrative team often. Yeah. And so Mrs. Meyer would determine responsible for each, doing a RACI matrix, who's responsible, accountable for something, consulted or informed. All that to say, we may have several district administrators because they need to take on different things from the work group. They do that work behind the scenes, and then they can bring it back often to the steering committee or work with their work group for approval and input. But they know this stuff most intimately. So I wouldn't put a cap on that. What I might suggest again is, consist of approximately 20 to 40 people. 40 is probably a little too large for the time frame that we're looking at. We will have to set some meetings. We will not be able, this is something we should make people aware of as well. As we set meetings, we will not be able to poll 30 people and see what works for them. We'll have to set some meetings, and people will come as they are able. Recently worked with a district about double our size, and they originally had about 40 people on a steering committee, but at any given time, 24 or 25 would show up. I don't know if some of those 40 never showed up, but I wonder about something approximately 20 to 40 or 20 to 30, again, leaving it sort of open.
I hear that. The only cap I was suggesting would be on the total number of members.
Yeah, right.
And only because, and this is actually a question for our council, this ad hoc committee is going to be a public body. So we're going to need to know when we have a quorum and when we don't have a quorum. And we're going to need to list the members, regardless of what administrators or faculty may participate in the working groups that are contemplated in that kind of timeline and plan. So I just get concerned about boring quorum requirements. Which doesn't mean it, but if so that means that it's not so open-ended. But if we have officially 40 members of a steering committee, are we going to get 21 people showing up at every meeting to have a quorum? That's my concern.
Oh, I see.
Now we don't have to cap it in the charge, and we can just once people submit, community members, and Mrs. Meyer reaches out to determine faculty and staff participation, we'll have a number, and we can then just post it, and that will be it. We don't have to have a cap in the charge. I don't want to get too hung up on the charge, because really we want to discuss big picture. So we can certainly say it will consist of approximately 20 to 40 members, comprised at a minimum, and then we just have the categories of stakeholders, which are now superintendent, district level administrator, and then the rest as written. So, and then I've actually changed in the copy that I have that will culminate in a 3 to 5 year strategic plan, that upon recommendation. So I took out 2025. Any additional thoughts before we entertain a motion? And also there's the discussion around just the timeline document that you have, and just in terms of that process, that Dr. McEwen and Mrs. Meyer and I worked on that. That is very much a draft, and in terms of that process, what I think we envision is, if this body approves the charge, we can reach out as needed to get the membership of the steering committee, but then also have potentially a revised draft timeline document for this body at the January 5th meeting. And then after that, the steering committee would convene for the first time. I think that's kind of what we discussed happening. Am I recalling correctly?
You are. I'm going back to a question though, just about the notion of a quorum and an ad hoc committee. You know, I didn't take part in the strategic planning before, and my strategic planning work outside of this district that have not been open meetings. They just haven't been. And so given our time frame, I'm just wondering, does this rule about quorums and open meetings, is this what we did last time we had our strategic planning? My worry is, what if we don't have those and then we don't have meetings? We will fall behind pretty rapidly. And so I just don't know I know for our quorum being, I know we've done that for, various subcommittees. I'm just realizing what a sticking point that could become.
OMA addresses ad hoc committees. Still a public body,
Okay.
Dr. McEwen, unfortunately.
Yeah. So the same thing.
Now, whether you can set a quorum level that's lower than the majority, I mean, you might be able to do that to avoid cancellation of meetings.
Yeah. I mean, I'm certainly not trying to get an end around open meetings. I'm certainly not trying to have, whole meetings when not everybody can be there. But just knowing when you do try to bring a large collaborative group together, what can happen, and our time frame, I just want to be careful. So maybe we could look into just that lower threshold. That could be helpful.
I can look at that, but I guess the answer to that question is, if you're going to recruit people who want to be committed to the process, they have to be committed to the process.
Yeah, we'll be clear about that, and we may need to then set some meeting times.
Yeah.
We'll need to set all of the meetings in advance, basically, so that people have carved them in, and then the working groups and the other the subcommittees will do what they do, and we'll in between. Thank you. Any other discussion, or is there a motion to approve the charge with the changes I mentioned, which I can go over again, because I think that's kind of our consensus with respect to the changes. Any discussion, further discussion, or is there a motion to accept the ad hoc strategic plan steering committee charge with the following changes? The last sentence in the second paragraph is changed to, we'll culminate in a 3 to 5 year strategic plan. Delete 2025. Then the paragraph before the bullets, last sentence, it will consist of approximately 20 to 40 members. And then we've added a second bullet, which is district level administrator. And again, the text above it reads that that's just at a minimum. Is there a motion to accept the charge with those changes?
Move.
So moved by Mr. Murphy. Is there a second? Seconded by Dr. Quinn. Is there further discussion on the charge itself? All those in favor of approving the charge signify by saying aye. Roll call vote.
Allison Powell,
Aye.
Anne Musella,
Aye.
Jean Quinn,
Aye.
Lori McEwen,
Aye.
Kevin Murphy,
Aye.
William Hangan,
Aye.
Tim Muniz.
Aye.
Thank you all. Again, many thanks to Dr. McEwen for spearheading this. Mrs. Meyer, all of you. There's going to be a lot of work to be done, but we can do it in a very targeted, focused way. And so I appreciate that. And future thanks to everyone who's going to participate. It'll be a lot of work. Thank you. Is there any further discussion on the proposed timeline or the other document or any other questions on the process? So we will move on then. Yes, Mr. Munoz, sorry.
Just a real quick comment. I mean, I would be a little more bullish perhaps on being able to incorporate a fair amount of the work from the strategic plan into next year's budget. And because, you know, when I looked at it, I was certainly looking with an eye towards that. And I think at the midpoint in March, you know, we've already settled on some strategies and working groups have reported back and everything like that. So I think at minimum, you know, those will be important inputs that we can certainly consider in the budget process. And so if there's any way we can do that and, you know, not miss a year for something that's important or, you know, should be something that we can spend money against that will have an impact in the following year, I'd like to do that. It seems like it aligns fairly well. So.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, thank you. Any further discussion on the timeline? We will discuss this again on January 5th because then we will start the process in earnest. So again, many, many thanks. Looking at the next agenda item. All right, this is something that was pointed out to me. Thank you, Ms. DiMaglio. Affirmation of a Code of Basic Management Principles and Ethical School Standards. And this is something that Mrs. DiMaglio pointed out to me was something that Carol and Mark would do shortly after the first organizational meeting. And it is really calling for the school committee as a whole to publicly affirm each of our individual commitments to this Code of Basic Management Principles and Ethical School Standards. So I would, as she did, I would like to read this aloud and then take up by roll call, ask for each member to indicate their affirmation. So bear with me while I read this aloud. This comes from Rhode Island General Laws, Section 16-2-9.1, the Code of Basic Management Principles and Ethical School Standards. School committees shall adopt the following Code of Basic Management Principles of Ethical School Standards. The East Greenwich School District does hereby establish a code of basic principles and ethical standards for school committee members acting individually and collectively as boards of education in the management of the public schools of the town of East Greenwich. The school committee in East Greenwich accepts the obligation to operate the public schools in accordance with the fundamental principles and standards of school management, which principles include but are not limited to the following. 1, formulate written policy for the administration of schools to be reviewed regularly and revised as necessary. 2, exercise legislative, policymaking, planning, and appraising functions and delegate administrative functions in the operation of schools. 3, recognize their critical responsibility for selecting the superintendent, defining his or her responsibilities, and evaluating his or her performance regularly without directly engaging in administrative processes. 4, accept and encourage a variety of opinions from and communication with all parts of the community. 5, make public relevant institutional information in order to promote communication and understanding between the school system and the community. 6, act on legislative and policy-making matters only after examining pertinent facts and considering the superintendent's recommendations. 7, conduct meetings with planned and published agendas. 8, encourage and promote professional growth of school staff so that quality of instruction and support services may continually be improved. 9, establish and maintain procedural steps for resolving complaints and criticisms of school affairs. 10, act only through public meetings, since individual board members have no authority to bind the board. 11, recognize that the first and greatest concern must be the educational welfare of the students attending the public schools. 12, work with other committee members to establish effective board policies and to delegate authority for the administration of the schools to the superintendent. 13, avoid being placed in a position of conflict of interest and refrain from using the committee position for personal gain. 14, attend all regularly scheduled committee meetings as possible and become informed concerning the issues to be considered at those meetings. B, nothing in this section shall be deemed to limit or interfere with the rights of teachers and other school employees to collectively bargain pursuant to chapters 9.3 and 9.4 of Title 28, or to allow any school committee or superintendent to abrogate any agreement reached by collective bargaining. Thank you for that. And now by roll call vote, I will ask if each member would like to affirm their commitment to those principles and standards.
Allison Paul,
Aye.
Ann Musella,
Aye.
Jean Quinn,
Aye.
Lori McEwen,
Aye.
Kevin Murphy,
Aye.
William Hangen,
Aye.
Tim Muniz.
Aye.
Thank you all very much. Next, we have reports of superintendent and staff. So, Mrs. Meyer, we'll turn it over to you again.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Arnoff, if you would be kind enough to display my very brief presentation to go along with my remarks. Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Arnoff. Next slide. My remarks this evening are involve a COVID update regarding district data, some RIDO update and guidance information, a new Rhode Island school calendar that was issued, some brief information about our facilities, staffing, a presentation or a short, some slides around site-based management. Next slide, please. So our data, is before you, and it said current as of 12/15 when I made this slide, but actually it's current as of 12/17 because we had more information about students being positive. So we have had 36 positive student cases in the district as of this afternoon, and 14 staff members that have been impacted by that. Next slide. And this is just some information that I think is, vitally important that we continue to discuss it as we come together at a school committee meeting and continue to talk about the health and safety of our school community. RIDO, the CDC updated some guidance about quarantining, and RIDO has embraced some of that with additional information. So anybody that you should quarantine if you do not have symptoms but have been in close contact. And what is close contact? Within 6 feet of somebody that is positive for COVID for more than 15 minutes. The CDC continues to endorse a 14-day quarantine as the safest protocol, but release new data information to allow public health officials to modify policies, and those are referenced in that link. So what are the updated guidance? Rather than the 14-day quarantine, it has now been reduced for 10 days from the last moment of exposure. So very specific as to the date where somebody is considered a close contact based on their, that positive individual's ability to spread the virus. The quarantine can be shortened to 7 days if you have a negative test result that was taken 5 days or more after being exposed. And then quarantine 14 days from your last known exposure if you are a resident or a staff of a long-term care facility. Those are the updated guidelines that I included in there. Next slide, please, Dr. Arnoff. So East Greenwich will continue with the 14-day quarantine requirement for the following circumstances. Anybody that is traveling to a location with a positivity rate greater than 5%. Anybody that has a close household contact, meaning if somebody is living in your household and tests positive, all other members must isolate for 10 days and then follow a 14-day quarantine period. So that's consistent with what is happening now. The rationale for that is anybody that does have the virus in that 10-day period is the window by which they are able to spread the virus to somebody else. For all other non-household contacts, EG will allow for the following flexibility. Quarantine period can be reduced from 14 days to 10 days only if proof of a negative test result taken on or after the 7-day quarantine period is provided to the school. And then I just really encourage everybody to pay attention to and comply with the health and safety guidelines. That link is live. And the next slide, I just wanted to bring everyone's attention to that. If you would advance the slides. This clearly isn't a very good view, but remember the 3 W's: wear a mask, wash your hands, and watch your distance. Our ability to continue with in-person learning, certainly with the holidays before us, are going to rely on people following, especially those social gathering rules, and limiting, as difficult as it may be, limiting those opportunities to keep it to your household members, because the data is quite clear that that is where spread is happening, and then largely impacts other settings. So I put that there as a reminder and encourage folks to do this. On December 14th, that's fine, Dr. Arnoff, the commissioner communicated with districts and presented a updated, if you will, calendar to the Rhode Island School Unified Calendar. You have that calendar before you. The reviews what the school committee approved on last Thursday's meeting a week ago. But in this calendar, I want to draw your attention to what the commissioner has requested, and that is on days 4, 5, and 6 of January. You will note that's in blue, and she has designated those days as distance learning days, and in fact qualified that comment by allowing for a 10-day quarantine for testing, for quarantine, and then for testing plans to be developed and scheduled for schools. That part about the testing piece, the district has already expressed its interest in providing testing in our district, and we'll work with the EDOC on that. But this commissioner's calendar changes what was approved by the school committee with regard to the 8 days of distance learning. We had talked about at that time bringing in our special populations. We will still do that on December 21st, 22nd, and 23rd, and on the 7th and the 8th. While this calendar says a staggered return on the 11th, in our district, we will return to our current in-person model on the 11th. We won't need to do a staggered return. So what I'm saying to you this evening, the 4th, 5th, and 6th will be distance learning days for everyone in the district. Our buildings will not be open on those days with the exception of our custodians working. Next slide, Dr. Arnoff. And this is just the recommendation that was approved last Thursday by the school committee. And the only change is, again, we are only doing 8 days of distance learning. Out of those 8 days, 5 of our students that are special population students and that have already been contacted primarily by their case managers will continue to come in on those 5 days, but the dates of January 4th, 5th, and 6th, our buildings will remain closed to afford us the opportunity to appropriately quarantine based on the commissioner's calendar. Again, we're stay committed to that, resuming our current model on January 11th. Next slide, please, Dr. Arnoff. Facilities, the HEPA filters, HEPA air filters or purifiers have been placed in all classroom, almost all common spaces and office spaces. Our contractor, which is ESI, is currently resetting the building air exchange. You may recall earlier in the year, we had conversations about how much air we are pushing through our buildings and what those settings are. So they are being reset back to our typical settings, which will result in some energy savings. And we are able to do that because the air purifiers exchange the air rate at an acceptable 4 to 6 times in an hour in our school buildings. Over the break, heavy cleaning and disinfection will continue in all of our buildings. Next slide, please. At the Thursday, I added this slide in here to help maybe clarify some of the questions certainly some of the school committee members had when we talked about our staffing challenges and be more clear to the community. With the help of Ms. Emilio, she put together this comparison chart when we talked about what our staffing challenges look like. Even though it says 12/10 on the left, 12/10 2020, it's really the correct date here is on both sides 12/10 2020. So just a comparison for you. In 2019, on a similar date, we had 42.5 absences, and this lays it out for you so you can see some of the different reasons why people would be not coming to work on a day, whether it's a sick day or a personal day. In 2019, we had some folks going to conferences on that day and workers' compensation. But this year on 12/10, we had 77 staff members out, and you can see how those are designated. The district is averaging about 70 absences a day with only about a 50% fill rate. And currently we have, and this approximately 15 staff members that are isolating or quarantining. Doesn't necessarily mean that is a result of contact in our buildings or in our district, but it could be a result of their own personal situations. And then the next slide, which is not terrific, but it sort of gives you a little bit of a snapshot into, and the reason it doesn't look terrific is I had to take the picture with my phone because they were having some technical difficulties with my ability to scan here in my office. But this is what a morning looks like currently with our current reality. And all of these yellow highlighted boxes are classrooms that need to be covered that morning. There are, which you might not be able to see very clearly, but if you see a little image to the right, those indicate classes that need to be covered by teachers, not by substitutes that are in the building. So as you can see, there's 30 plus classrooms that have to be covered on that one day in that classroom. And I think the next slide starts to talk about site-based management. So I'm going to pause here because before we go into the next topic and respond to any questions folks may have.
Thank you, Mrs. Meyer. Are there any questions or comments from the school committee on the COVID update and the revised calendar, or safety protocols and the statewide calendar, all of that? And I can't see everybody right now because the presentation is up, so I'm sorry if you want to.
You can take that down, Dr. Arnold. Yeah. Here we go.
Good question.
Yes, of course, Mr. Murphy.
Ms. Meyer, thank you for the presentation. What was that date where there were all the absences that were highlighted in yellow? What date was that, if you recall?
That was 12/8, actually.
12/8. Okay. So that would have been in advance of our last school committee meeting.
That's
in
correct.
which obviously led to your analysis, which led to the more dire need that was was your intention to convey the last meeting.
Yes, yes,
Okay, so I appreciate that date. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Additional comments or questions from the school committee? I feel compelled to open this up if there are any comments from members of the public, because I know we've received a lot of correspondence, and I appreciate that it's a difficult time for everybody, and everybody is stretched really thin for a number of reasons. Our schools are stretched, families are stretched. So I think we all appreciate that. It's a very difficult time. And again, I cannot thank Mrs. Meyer enough for, first of all, keeping all of us as safe as possible. Their students, our faculty, working with our administrators, in fact, and everyone else. Appreciate that, and everything. Just a series of moving targets. So I can't extend enough thanks for that. Are there any members of the public who want to comment? I'm not seeing any hands. I just thank everybody for everyone's continued patience, and there's a light at the end of the tunnel. we just have to continue to be patient, and so thank you, Mrs. Meyer. Unless there are any other questions or comments from the school committee, we can move forward on site-based management.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As we wait, I think Mr.
Sorry,
Murphy has his
one
hand.
quick question. There was about, I want to say it was 2 slides before where we just discussed the highlighted portion. I wanted to say was it 70? Was that the number?
I'm not sure which slide, Mr. Murphy.
It was 2 slides before the highlighted.
About the average amount of absences.
The attendances from the 2 years, the 2-year comparison.
So we're talking about double in this particular instance, right?
Yeah, we
this
are.
particular month.
We
Roughly
are.
double.
We are.
All right.
We are.
All right.
And you can't disregard the rate of infection that's happening around us. Our infection rate is 8%. And, comparatively speaking, we're at the bottom third maybe of the tier if you look at each municipality. But if you look deeper in the data, and I was going to present it, but we have a long agenda tonight, and you see the number of cases are just growing in our district and every district, and then that has just a larger impact on who needs to quarantine, who must isolate. And to Ms. Bucella's point, there really is light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, I anticipate us, there was an article in the EG magazine today about the town being able to be a vaccination site and how that might impact all of us. Our ability to have testing after the holidays will also be potentially a game changer. Most importantly, the guidelines that are coming from RIDO are really on all of us to do the right thing in these next few weeks, because we all know that in person is the best place for our students to be.
Right. I'm glad you emphasized RIDO. That's an important emphasis, not just for us committee members, but also for the public to emphasize RIDO, maybe even more now than before in your previous presentation. So I think that's great. The other thing I'll just note quickly, if you wouldn't mind, Madam Chair, I think we've all read a variety of correspondences, and I'll speak to just a few anecdotally because they range all the way from congratulations, great job, I think you're doing the right thing because it's unsafe, to I can't believe you're closing the schools, I need to shutter my business. And that's a huge spectrum that we're trying to understand and respect, because I think it does take a great deal of respect for those who are really impacted in a negative way by this. And I know it's the last thing you want to do, so I want to be clear. And also, I also want to just show my utmost appreciation for the teachers themselves, because this has to have been one of the most brutal years in anyone's teaching career. So, deep respect for the teachers, deep respect for the parents, and of course the students who are putting their heart and soul into this. So it's a lot to think about. I'm glad the light's at the end of the tunnel. We've all read the variety of correspondences, and they really are a range. But I think given this last presentation, I'm much more comfortable where we are in our decision this Thursday, which would have been Tuesday, than I was last meeting. So thank you for your previous report moments ago, and I look forward to your next report.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Madam
Thank you,
Chair.
Mr.
And
Murphy.
thank you,
Thank you.
Ms. Meyer.
And, and I just actually would add to that, just to Mr. Murphy's point, the correspondence we've received, and I hear the discussion and the calls for, are there metrics? How do we measure? There are so many moving parts, and it's something that I think Dr. Quinn pointed out. I don't know that there are such metrics, and it's difficult. We want to always deliberate and provide well-reasoned decisions, but we also have to trust the judgment of our superintendent, who is on the front line. And so it's a balance. We have a responsibility to be fully informed, but at the same time, when our administrators and faculty we have the impression that they're sort of in triage mode, we're also going to adjust accordingly. So I just appreciate everyone's collective patience. Those of us who didn't grow up here moved here for the schools, almost uniformly, almost unilaterally, and it is the teachers who are the individuals who are delivering that education that we all move here for, that we're paying higher taxes for. It's because of the teachers. And I think a couple of community members, mentioned grace and bringing grace into the equation. And I just appreciate that sentiment as well. This is not easy for anyone. So thank you. Mrs. Meyer, are we moving on to site-based management?
Site-based management. Thank you, Dr. Arnoff, this is a very brief summary, and most of the members of the school committee, whether they are former members or new members, have seen a little bit about this, but it is time for us to revisit it and prepare for implementing. So next slide, please. This site-based management, along with other things, was associated with the Education Accountability Act of 2019. And essentially it was to expand the duties of principals and school improvement teams. It articulates the governance shifts. Site-based management, essentially it is modeled after the Massachusetts model, which our legislators look to because of their performance over the last 20 years. Their implementation of this is at least, I think, 20 years old. And then it does establish a district accountability system, just an updated one. There still is a district accountability system, but this will be new and improved. Next slide, please. And I took all of this from a presentation that was provided by the RIDE team to the Superintendent's Association, and it was also provided to the School Committee Association. This was at the end of the slide. I moved this up to the beginning of the slide, so it gives us a point of reference where we are. COVID got in the way of the forward movement of this, and the technical assistance, if you will, that RIDE was expected to provide for each of the LEAs. So as you can see, they're beginning that work, revisiting that work in right now in the winter of 2020. And we can expect to have guidance and training models for them in the spring, and then additional principal training and technical assistance development. That was, we had expected that really, in the spring of 2020, if not before that. So we can expect for guidance coming in February. And then this new Rhode Island Data Hub, where we're looking at the fall of 2020, they are really building that right now. They are describing it as something that is going to be remarkable and only exists in Tennessee, I think they said. So I look forward to seeing what that data hub looks like. But the purpose of the data hub is for the district accountability and to have measures. And I think it will help us as we think about our strategic plan and how we measure what we articulate in that plan. And the fall of 2022, is expected with full implementation for every Rhode Island district. We in our district have begun the work of, school improvement teams. They've already been in place at some level, but we're beginning to think more deeply about it and formalize it. There will be a role for the school committee in appointing members of individual school improvement teams. So that will be work that will be coming before you in the future. Next slide, please. So in the legislation, it uses the term participatory leadership, and this site-based management is built on that concept of shared leadership. And it speaks to putting the decision-making closer to the kids. And it establishes clear expectations for school committees, principals, and school improvement teams. The purpose is to increase the diversity of perspectives, create better buy-in, and promote collaboration between and among the different stakeholders in the districts. Next slide, please, and I'll go very quickly. The changes were related to personnel decisions, fully shifting to the superintendent. We have implemented that in the district as I appoint members, but sort of introduce them and welcome them at school committee meetings. The establishment of a school improvement team and select personnel processes defined by law and regulation. It's interesting because they reference the law that there was a change to establishing school improvement teams. There was a previous law related to funding for professional development that required a school improvement team. So I guess revisiting some of former structures in school settings. Next slide. Principals now have new responsibilities. They prepare a school budget, which in our district they already have. They typically do recommend hiring. I don't know so much about termination. They evaluate personnel and they develop a school improvement plan. So the one big thing is the overseeing school facilities and equipment. I think there's some level of that they already do right now. So I don't think that this is just the formalization of the school improvement plan and how the school improvement team functions. Next slide. And these are the powers of the superintendent that have changed. I don't have to necessarily read them to you. They're in the slide presentation. But as you can see, it's sort of the list becomes bigger for the superintendent as compared to prior to the act. And next slide, Dr. Aronoff. Is that the last one? That may be the last one. So there, very quick overview for you about the changes and how the legislation impacts our work. And mainly, and I will speak just one final thing with regard to that, the responsibility for the school committee still retains with developing policy. And I'll answer any questions that you might have.
Actually, I just want to add to, thank you, Mrs. Meyer, for the overview. And I just also want to add to that, there was Mrs. Meyer attended a presentation through RISA, and then there was, an equivalent through RIASC. RIASC chairs, Dr. McEwen attended sort of the first part of it. And the gist, what I got out of the RIASC version was the two deputy commissioners, were there. And one of the things they did was they asked, there were questions that they fielded from other school committee chairs, and they seemed to be asking for feedback and questions so that their future guidance, that according to that slide will be coming out in February, and also to potentially go to the General Assembly with for tweaking, I mean the statute, for lack of a better word. So I'd like to suggest, maybe, and Mrs. Meyer, I don't know what you think about this. We did something similar to with respect to field trips when after the initial field trip advisory was issued by RIDE, um, there was some scrambling, and then there was a call for questions to RIDE, and then they I think issued other interpretive documents. And the way we did that was, I think, combination of Ms. DeMeglio and Dr. Mercurio at the time, and then possibly we could collaborate with our council and come up with collective questions, comments, suggestions for clarification, perhaps as a district to forward to RIDE potentially. Mrs. Meyer, how do you feel about that?
I'm certainly in agreement with that, Ms. Musella. So we could just, I'm just thinking in my mind how we would gather those thoughts, what would be the best process for that. And I'm sure I can rely on Ms. DeMeglio to remind me how we gathered those thoughts for the field trip.
Yeah, I think we solicited them. I recall, just because we were so close to the field trip issue. I think that people who were interested, there were a couple of members of the policy committee that were very interested in participating, sent some questions and comments by email to Ms. DeMeglio and Dr. Mercurio, and then a subset of us looked at it, and then perhaps with Matt Oliverio, because he may be able to answer some of the questions. But I mean, if there are big questions or things that we would like to, ways in which we would like to suggest changes or seeking specific guidance, we can compile that relatively quickly, I think. And maybe Ms. DeMeglio can and you can maybe send something out to maybe the school committee and administrative council with maybe a deadline. Okay. I think that's how we did it before. But with that, I would then open it up to questions and discussion on Ms. Meyer's presentation.
I'll try to be brief because we can get into this with questions that we pose later. Thank you very much for that. You know, what I note is that some of the language I would consider vague. I think oversee, for example, is really vague. And I talked earlier about an accountability or a RACI matrix. And so this, you know, I can tell you that in Massachusetts, the things that we have around this building and facilities issue. What does it mean for a principal to oversee when, you know, really we have a budget that is often centralized around building and facilities, custodians who may not report to a principal, you know, it's all of those lines of authority and site responsibility that will be interesting. So I think for even the administrative council to try to think about what would that mean? What would I envision oversee as, and what would the central office, you know, have the school-based and central office administrators think about what it would mean to each of them to undertake those verbs. And then if they are not operationalized the same way, that could be questions that we seek clarity about. And I'll obviously, you know, I'll take a look too and think about it, but some of that we might think about tightening up.
Thank you. Ms. Powell, your hand is halfway raised.
I don't want to make things take forever, but because Dr. McEwen brought it up, with respect to facilities, that was something that was even, I know that a lot of school committee members, because they reached out to me, who are facilities chairs, actually tried to work with RIASC to even change some of that language before the statute was passed, because that is very vague. One of the things when I saw it that I thought of, and I don't know how much this will work for other subcommittees, but would be to, you know, have facilities meet with the superintendent and with the administrative council, because we did get clarity legislatively that, you know, it's still up to the principals and the superintendents about how, you know, they're going to administer these things. So if it's a district's policy, say, to have a facilities director who still oversees all of these, and the building administrator, like that's the district's policy, and the district administrators agree to that, it doesn't necessarily have to change. And I did get clarity that the legislation does not preclude that. You can't, they don't get, you can't write away the accountability in policy, but you can streamline sort of how the processes are going to work within the district as long as it's an administrative decision. So I don't know if that helps. I only know about it from that, but I obviously that would apply to any part of the change in the legislation. So that was my
Thank
comment.
you. Other questions or comments? And I mean, it's something that's specific. I mean, that might be something good for our communications if we decide to go that way. That's I don't see any other questions or comments. I could ask if there are members of the public who want to have questions or comments, but I don't see any hands. So then I think we move on to the next agenda item, which is a teaching and learning update specifically on distance learning. Mrs. Meyer, will you be presenting, or will Mr. Pedraza?
Mr.
Here he
Pedraza
is.
is prepared to present.
Here he is.
Good evening, everyone. So the distance learning talking points for tonight really focus in on what we've done since the reopening plans. Really the distance learning foundation was formed in our expectations for distance learning that were created this summer, promulgated this fall, and have been successfully implemented throughout this school year and modified and with bumps along the way and pivoting here and there and learning. And they're going to be in place for all students pre-K through 12. These expectations for student learning have been sent out by all principals to the community. They've been placed on the main page of the district website. And again, they are the foundation in so far as that they're even embedded in an MOA with all of our personnel, and those are being monitored and adhered to. I'm just going to put two highlights out there because as we switch to distance learning, some of the fears out there, what comes out for some people is it's a reverting back to March, it's reverting back to April, and nothing could be further from the truth. So a few of the highlights for those who either don't know or may have forgotten or have been lucky enough to not experience distance learning so far this year. A few of the highlights is teachers and students follow a daily schedule that we attempt to approximate their actual in-person schedule. We're shooting for that 330 minutes of instruction, but obviously developmentally appropriateness, which goes to then age, as well as some of the general routines of a classroom routine. Everybody going to the bathroom together, everybody responding at a time. So there are certain things that don't translate over and that we need to have flexibility for, but so far we're really seeing that. And in that daily schedule, what that does is it provides us those opportunities to provide as many synchronous opportunities as possible. That live instruction, that check-in, that small virtual groups, that one-to-one interaction, again, as is developmentally appropriate, is so critical. I actually was fortunate enough to catch a webinar from Harvard folks, and that, I'm still a big fan of asynchronous in that it promotes that autonomy and allows interest and time schedules. But there is something about being in a community of learners that can respond to one another, that social aspect that when somebody, or especially a teacher, gives out an example, that a member of that class and a community, when they think, did they give that example because they know I like that, or they knew I was struggling, is so important and keeps that classroom dynamic up. And our teachers have done a fantastic job, both in person and online, and are going to continue to do that over these 8 days. In addition, one of the main comments that also comes up is that this normally scheduled schedule does include specials, does include art, music, PE. So our itinerants are also going in, and so students are not missing out on some of their favorite subjects as well as their normal routines. All classes and teachers will continue to communicate through Google Classroom in grades 3 through 12. And then, as I highlighted in my last presentation, for pre-K through grades 2, use a platform called Seesaw to share those daily schedules out. Our teachers have been extremely busy over the since you gave that approval and put the gavel down, if you will, planning for the 8 days. This has been complicated by the snow day, a few internet outages here and there, and now even the ride calendar. But we have had Chromebook surveys go out. We've had Chromebooks distributed. We've had packets and going out with students. We were fortunate enough to visit 5 schools at the end of their school days yesterday. Mrs. Meyer and Dr. Hughes and myself, and we saw all the brown bags were going home just in case. So we'll hopefully get to see students, and that work will continue tomorrow. Additionally, all teachers from pre-K through grade 12 have been given a distance learning planning consideration checklist that we created, and then as an administrative team, each principal customized that distance learning checklist for each school. It reinforces best practices and workflows based on not only instructional routines, but really on checking in and making sure student well-being and communication with families is paramount. We know we've been highlighting that it's only 8 days, but again, that connection, that hey, we want to make sure that where are you? Is this working for you? That continues, that again, that social, emotional, and personal connection is really paramount and is reflected in that checklist, and our principals have done a fantastic job of those routines. To that end, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Office of Student Service under Dr. Hughes. They've reviewed all their IDLPs and have had most recently worked with all of our school social workers and school psychologists to make sure that we can not only continue existing services, but they've also recently established workflows and office hours for those students and families who might need either new or expand upon their existing supports. So I really need to give them a shout out to them, because again, in many cases, when we talk about distance learning, it becomes about digital, it becomes about internet and Chromebooks. But again, our school psychologists, the offices of student services, and our teachers have really focused in on the classroom, the learning, and the support. So this information, which was highlighted in a letter that Superintendent Myers did send out already, along with links to my previous remote distance learning support, did go out to the community yesterday, and is again really the foundation of what we've been doing all year. And so we look to continue that in the next over the next 8 days. Or we'll be in person tomorrow, and then we'll be in person or remote for most under the new ride guidelines for those the 21st, 22nd, 23rd, and then the week after vacation.
Thank you, Mr. Pedraza.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Any comments or questions from Mr. Pedraza from the committee? Dr. McEwen? I think you're on mute.
Yep. Sorry, enjoying my tea. Thank you very much for that, Mr. Pedraza, and thanks to the community of teachers for reverting back this way and clearly doing it so seamlessly, given the or at least we intended to be seamless, given the work that you did in March. Again, I know that we've discussed this. I look forward, and we don't want to over-survey people. I'll really be interested in getting perceptions from folks, in the months to come, and also hearing from teachers about what of remote learning they might want to keep, that's really worked to engage some students differently or to allow students to work at their own pace. And again, I don't need a response, but I know that they're finding what works and what doesn't. We appreciate their flexibility, and I look forward to hearing back about that.
They're in the queue, so that for both community and faculty, those will go out. And most of them are reflecting on Q1. However, I think that those will also come out in terms of our existing framework, especially when the community one goes out. Once we go after break, we'll probably push once again, and we'll have some data that way. Unfortunately, some of the reasons to shift to distance learning took us to different directions and to different schools, which was great because I got to play a substitute in some grade levels that I wouldn't normally get to play substitute in. I don't know how the kids liked it, but I loved it. So those will be forthcoming.
Thank you. Thanks, Dr. McEwen. Any other questions or comments from the committee? Because I would like to open up to see if there is a hand raised in the public. Before I go to the public, any other questions or comments from the committee of Mr. Pedraza? I don't see any, and I know that Mr. Murphy.
I'll be quick. I have noticed the difference. Obviously, we were doing distance learning at my home today. It was a tremendous difference between what we entered into today and what we entered into in March, April. It's much improved. I think both my children, my 13-year-old and my 11-year-old, they know what's coming. And I'm not saying it was easier for parents, but at least it was easier for them. So therefore, it's easier for parents. Not easy, but easier. So I did notice a difference, and it's duly noted, and I appreciate that. So it's a marked improvement, and I know these things take time. It's a trial and error, and it's it was nice to experience the distance learning with my children today.
And that's great to hear, especially since today's distance learning was, it was based on a weather event, which was based on as much as, we knew it was coming, but at the same time, it was also with elementary also being planned for a half day, it wouldn't be 2020 without a few different wrenches that we didn't. So that's great feedback, and I think a great experience. And I think that over the 21st, 22nd, 23rd, where we have full schedules implemented, you'll see it grow even more, as well as some of that communication to make sure parents have everything that they need to support their students. Do you have the logins? Do you have the schedule? Do you have all of those things, the packets? Do you have a good understanding that hopefully all of those things, or I'm confident those things will continue to be in place. So glad it was in place today. So thank you.
Yes, it was, and hope parents experience or have the same experience that I did, the same positive experience I had today. So
thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Anything else in the committee? I don't see anything. I do see that Denise Lopez has her hand raised. So Mrs. Lopez, hello.
Hello. I will keep it brief with time. The one question I had is, there's no doubt that the distance learning is better than it was in March, but at what point do we assess any possible gaps in learning for our, we're keeping the boat afloat, but there's certainly going to be some students, you hear the rumblings already where parents are like, do I hold my child back a year? Are they keeping the pace? Are they getting the skills that they're going to need? I have a middle schooler and a high school or a different school, but some, basic skills that they need to get to that next level of learning. And even our older learners, they're not, I had a discussion with one of my teachers, we realized a gap in note taking, things that you can't see or assess till maybe you have a dip. If you have a student that's a, straight A student, did poorly on a test. So I was like, well, what's going on? And so we looked at the note taking, and this is stuff that's supposed to be getting them ready for that next level of learning for high school. It's not something we can answer tonight, but just to put on the radar, where, when, or how do we look to see, have we done enough, or how do we fill that gap at where we're at?
Thank you, Mrs. Lopez. Mr.
Sure.
Pedraza and Mrs. Meyer. Oh, please go ahead.
know, and just one other thing, to clarify the calendar, will we get a notice on the change? I was just a little confused as to how it impacts when the kids go back in January, or is that to be determined?
My
With the
understanding is
transition
that
back.
the calendar does not change. What we have approved on Mrs. Meyer's recommendation last week still stands. The only difference is with respect to the 3 days in the January 4th, 5th, and 6th. And the difference is that no one will be in person, whereas the 7th and 8th students receiving special services, those who have been notified, would be in the building to receive those services. That's the only difference. Those 3 days will not be in person for anyone. That's my understanding. But with respect to everything, thank you. And Mrs. Meyer is nodding. Did you want to address Mrs. Lopez's original point?
So in terms of gaps, we are working with the Department of Education and our normal baseline testing or universal screens in terms of our STAR Renaissance. We have expanded that this year and are doing more testing in terms of the beginning of the year, mid-year, and end year for all of those we still are awaiting the state rollout of standardized testing. In terms of those gaps, we at the local level or at the school level, we continue to look at local metrics and in terms of grade and grade distributions and grade patterning. And we're actually taking a look in terms of having bigger, or having big conversations, because in some cases, we've all heard of students who were once thriving academically and are now struggling, and can quite the opposite. Some students who were struggling who are now thriving in this new environment. But outside of just the metrics, we have to look at what is the practice behind the metrics. We're reading in many cases, even whether it be through elementary schools, through colleges, of these failure rates. But when we talk to our educators about what they're doing, they're not just recreating the in-person experience digitally, as they're trying to take the best of it, but they're also trying to account for teaching and learning and living in a global pandemic. And so the days of, okay, I can come in, sit down, take in what the teacher says, and then maybe and then I take a quiz or a test here and there and kind of come on out. Like, I've got that kids who had that game of school, if you will. Now in many cases, teachers have said, listen, I know you're under stress, we know we have all these things, so we're going to do lots of rough drafts. We're not going to do just one big test. We're going to break it down. Well, for a student who counted on one big test or a quiz every week and then a big unit test to drive their grade, who's now getting daily or every other day check-ins and things to turn in and rough drafts and, okay, give this back to me, and then having that come across not just one teacher but potentially all of the teachers. School's different. Teaching and learning is different. The assessment of that student, the assessment of learning is different. And we're going back and not saying, okay, well, what are they doing? What are they turning in? But it's more of, have we prepared them for what we're now asking them to do? It's not 20% multiple choice, 20% fill in the blank, and then your essay. It's rewrites, drafts, feedback, communication skill. So, how well does that, translate? And so there are going to be shifts. So there's shifts in teaching, and so there are shifts potentially in learning. And so we're taking a look at all of that. That's a long way around the barn, which I think I do a lot of times, to say that, the gaps that are the things that are emerging, our students might have gaps to what they used to do, but they are picking up and they are learning things of which we never anticipated. They are learning skills. They are picking up the resiliency aspects. They are evolving. They are adapting. They are meeting with their friends and new friends on a digital space. So while there are traditional gaps that are emerging and that we're looking to make sure that we narrow, we're also trying to not lose sight of also, we've maybe made some big time improvements in focusing in on learning and being responsive to what students are turning in and where they're at, not where we predetermined that they should be. And that's going to be an important step for us to maintain moving forward. So we've got the traditional piece. We're looking to address that. We're monitoring through our current data, is what we expect students to know and able to do. Are our grades an accurate reflection of that, as well as then focusing in on what are some of the good things that we're picking up that we don't want to lose, that maybe we're not measuring or we're not communicating effectively. And we're going to continue in that narrative for quite some time, because as we've discussed before, this is going to cause a shift in teaching and learning for quite some time moving forward. But we continue to be focused on achieving the highest standards and iterating quickly to get us there.
Thank you, Mr. Pedraza. Dr. Quinn.
I just want to add that my experience with my own students has been very similar to what Mr. Pedraza just stated. The assessment is different, and students have to adapt to it. I don't necessarily think it's worse. In some ways, it's more realistic. So thank you, Mr. Pedraza, for that presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I do hear a lot of parent comments, and some of them are like, my kids are falling behind. Are my kids falling behind? And that's all relative, and that's going to all change. And that's kind of what I hear you say, and I hear the collective discussion. So I appreciate that as a parent, certainly. But there's a lot of that in the community, and it's just we're framing it differently, and I just appreciate that. Thank you. I don't see any other hands raised in the public. Mr. Pedraza, thank you. If there are no further comments from the committee or questions, I know this is an ongoing discussion. I appreciate it, and I appreciate that everyone's still here at 9:45. And thank you, Mrs. Meyer.
Thank you. See you next year.
Yes, yes. With that, I added one item to the agenda. I realize it's late, and we have our council here, so just very briefly, this comes out of the topic of school committee communication. And of course, and this is for the members of the public who are here, of course, Mr. Oliverio gives new school committee members an orientation. But of course, questions arose because here we are in a once-in-a-century pandemic, and new school committee members are forced to make a decision on how we teach and learn in this once-in-a-century pandemic when they were sworn in 9 days before. That's a really difficult position to be in. It's all of this entire situation is difficult for everybody. So there were some questions about how do I respond as an individual? What do I do with this? How do I say, not wanting to undermine the body, not wanting to undermine any other individual member, and yet certainly as individuals we have the autonomy and we have relationships with members of the public. So I just asked Mr. Oliveira just to briefly kind of reiterate kind of how communications go. Certainly there are some cautions that we all take, but then there's a common sense aspect as well, and a comfort level. And then based on this collective discussion, we can also consider whether we want to set any policy around any communications, but we're not going to talk about that time. It's just something for members to think about. So, Mr. Oliveira.
So invariably, all of you members of the public body, the school committee, you have relationships with individuals, families in the community of East Greenwich. So you form these relationships. They voted for you to serve in this role, and they believe that if there's an issue that goes on within the schools, that they have an advocate in their corner that will advance whatever their interest or their questions may be. And so you're going to get inquiries, questions from the public with a request that some action be taken. And so because you can't necessarily take action on your own as an individual school committee member, because you can only act as a publicly convened body, I think and what I've told the new school committee members is always keep that in mind, that you act as a body of members and not as individuals, because otherwise you'd have chaos. So what I told Will and Tim and Kevin, when you receive those types of communications, and there'll be many of them, particularly this year, is of course you're going to be very polite and you acknowledge it and you do want to respond to it in some way. But if it's a request a certain action be made either on behalf of an individual student or constituency of families, I think you just indicate that you will bring that to the attention of the superintendent, the chair, and the body as a whole, and that, perhaps it will be put on the next school committee agenda, or it'll be up for discussion, whatever. I think that's the best way to respond, because the risk that you have if you start communicating with members of the community and then you send an email to other members of the committee and you start making decisions that aren't in a publicly convened meeting, you run into rolling quorum problems. And you're acting as individuals, but in a rolling quorum type of way, and it violates the Open Meetings Act. So my advice to you as the school committee is to be cautious. You want to be open with your constituency. You want to be transparent, but always remember that you don't act individually. You act as an elected member of a body, and we have to comply with certain statutes and laws that govern your activity and how you can conduct business. And that's sort of my pitch for you on that issue.
Thanks, Mr. Oliverio. And then also, if there are any issues, first of all, there's certain, as we all know, certainly there are personnel issues and privacy issues and all that, and we've been instructed on those accordingly. Matters that are, confidential and all that. With all that aside, certainly there may be some things that, first of all, as Mr. Oliverio points out, if there's something that that any member feels should be discussed by the body, reach out to me, reach out to Mrs. Meyer again to include on an agenda, number one. Number two, if there are certain circumstances that arise and members feel like there should be sort of a unified response, we can talk about that too. Potentially within the scope and the confines of the Open Meetings Act. So I think this is really kind of just food for thought, and this is just such an unusual time for all of us, and especially there's a learning curve with the school committee, and there's a potentially to have to jump into something like the pandemic right away is extraordinary. So thank you. Any comments or questions for Mr. Oliverio, or just in general? Dr. McEwen.
Just in general, I know that, in the policy committee, this is one of the reasons that we've been working on communication policies. It's I think, related. And it's basically some very simple common sense directives around going to the person closest to the issue. And so when folks say, how is this happening or that happening in this place, it's, if it's a student issue, it's the teacher first, the principal, and then you go up the chain. And so while people may want to, come to us about some issues, we always do well to ask them if they've had that first step with those folks. And sometimes they feel more comfortable talking to a friend or someone they know, a neighbor or something. But that's one of the reasons we have that in place as well.
Thank you. And you know, we can continue to talk about this. I just wanted to just leave a place to just to start this discussion if we need more. So thank you, Mr. Oliveira. It is late. It is 9:53. We started at 7:30. The next agenda item is school committee suggestions for future agenda items. Certainly, if anyone has any suggestions now, raise your hand. Also, feel free to reach out if there's something that you feel we need to discuss January 5th or even going forward. I don't see any hands. So with that, I think we're done. I think I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Ms. Powell, seconded by Mr. Murphy. Any discussion? Roll call vote. All those in favor of adjourning?
Allison Powell,
Aye.
Ann Musella,
Aye.
Jean Quinn,
Aye.
Lori McEwen,
Aye.
Kevin Murphy.
Aye.
William Hangen,
Aye.
Tim Muniz.
Mr. Muniz?
Aye.
Thank you. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much. If I don't see you, Happy New Year. Thank you to the 12 attendees that remain. Thank you all.
Great meeting,
Have a great
everyone.
night.
We saved the
Thank
best for
you.
last.